Hi, my name is Alexis Bergen, and for my final project, I chose the movie The Fisher King. In The Fisher King, one of the main characters, Perry, is portrayed as suffering from PTSD following his wife's murder. There are other disorders exhibited as well, but for the purposes of this presentation, I will be focusing on PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that is triggered by experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. In The Fisher King, Jack Lucas is a radio talk show host who inadvertently provokes one of the callers of his show into murdering a group of innocent people in a Manhattan bar. He then grows depressed and turns to alcohol. But just as he is about to hit rock bottom, he meets a homeless man named Perry. Perry's wife was killed by the caller that Jack inadvertently provoked. Perry is mentally scarred by the loss of his wife and suffers from PTSD and schizophrenia. Perry believes that he is on a quest from God to retrieve what he believes to be the Holy Grail. And Jack, feeling guilty, agrees to help him on his quest. Jack then ends up helping Perry get the girl of his dreams, and just as everything is going well for both Jack and Perry, Perry's memory gets triggered and he slips into a coma. The doctors in the movie say that his body is reliving his wife's murder over and over again. Perry then spends an extended period of time in a mental hospital. His girlfriend Lydia visits him and waits for him to wake up, while Jack moves on with his life and goes back to work. After getting his life back together, Jack visits Perry and decides the only way to help him is to retrieve what Perry believes to be the Holy Grail. After the Grail is retrieved, Perry wakes up and life goes on. Perry meets the criteria for abnormal in The Fisher King because he exhibits 3 of the 4 psychological criteria for abnormal. One of the 4 criteria are the violations of social norms, which he does by believing he is in a fantasy world and on a quest from God to get the Holy Grail. Another criteria for abnormal is statistical rarity. This is when a person exhibits a rare behavior, such as mental disability or extreme geniusness. Perry does not exhibit this criteria. Another criteria for abnormal is personal distress, which Perry exhibits because the main cause of his disorder is due to witnessing the murder of his wife, and he is also paranoid all the time about things that do not exist. The 4th and final criteria for abnormal is maladaptive behavior, which is when a person's behavior may cause them to harm themselves or others. Perry exhibits this because he does reckless and dangerous things that could hurt him and others as well throughout the movie. He does things such as running into traffic because he thought he saw the Red Knight. Perry's symptoms include being catatonic for a year following his wife's murder, auditory and visual hallucinations, as well as experiencing flashbacks of the night his wife was murdered, and on the night that he went on a date with Lydia, he got beat up and went into a coma, which the doctors said that was causing his body to re-experience the trauma of his wife's murder over and over again. Because Perry is believed to have schizophrenia and PTSD, not all of his symptoms are consistent with PTSD. His flashbacks and catatonic states, as well as his anxiety and paranoia, are typical symptoms of PTSD, but his hallucinations are more consistent with schizophrenia. The typical symptoms of PTSD are flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. The cause of Perry's PTSD was seeing his wife murdered right in front of him. This would be classified as a traumatic experience. Some common events that can lead to PTSD are combat exposure, childhood physical abuse, sexual violence, physical assault, being threatened with a weapon, an accident, a fire, a natural disaster, being mugged, being robbed, being in a plane crash, being tortured or kidnapped, receiving a life-threatening medical diagnosis, being involved in a terror attack, and other extreme or life-threatening events. As far as treatments go, in the movie, Perry spent some time at a mental hospital, first when he was in a catatonic state, immediately following his wife's murder, and again when he went into a coma after his date with Lydia. The common treatments of PTSD are medications and psychotherapy. Perry did not receive either of these treatments, that we know of. After considering the symptoms, causes, and treatments portrayed in the film, I believe the disorder was portrayed fairly accurately. The only big issue with the portrayal of Perry's disorder is that he did not receive medication or psychotherapy for his condition. The impact of PTSD on Perry's life was substantial. He was unable to keep his job as a professor. He was unable to keep his apartment due to the lack of job. And he was also unable to cope with his wife being murdered. He was also so traumatized that he made up a new identity for himself. And when Jack came along and helped him, things started to get better. Until he experienced a trigger. His future was looking somewhat promising when he went on his date with Lydia, but a kiss from her triggered the memory of his wife's murder and caused his body to re-experience the trauma over and over again, to the point of him not even fighting back when he got beat up and going into a coma. I think that Perry's disorder's effect on other people in his life was not accurately portrayed because Lydia waited around for months and possibly years, as it was never explicitly said in the movie. And that kind of thing just wouldn't happen after only one date in the real world. His effect on Jack's life was much more realistic, because they both had both positive and negative effects on each other. Jack got Perry his girlfriend, but he also stole a trophy that Perry thought was the Holy Grail, and did not try to get Perry any sort of psychotherapy or medication for his disorder. Perry inadvertently helped Jack get his life back together and stop being a depressed drunk all the time. But Perry also caused Jack to do some of the same crazy things that Perry did, such as experiencing audio and visual hallucinations, which we see when he went to steal the Grail. After watching the movie, I think it would be awful to live with this mental illness because of how much it can take over your life. I think that if I actually had the illness, I would try to get help, because my future is very important to me, and having PTSD could ruin it. Overall, I thought the mental illness was portrayed fairly accurately throughout the film. But I personally would not watch the movie again. I like Robin Williams, but The Fisher King is a very weird movie, in my opinion. Thank you.